Hey guys, welcome to the Woven Energy Podcast with me, Joseph Sikora, and Damon Smith. We're here to talk about shamanism from the ground up, and as is our way on the Woven Energy Podcast, we're going to be doing a practical episode today. So the last few episodes have been talking about the spirit dance, a few examples of where we can find it, what it's all about, a bit more about stage 3 of learning shamanism as well. So now we're going to get really down and practical in this episode. But first, we've got a few patrons to thank. So Damon, do you want to take that away?
Yes, I will, mate. So, huge thank yous to Juan Carlos Dunnick, Gary Norcross, and Mary Jane Bloom, 3 new members of our tribe. The growing tribe, I'm not sure, 22, 23, something like that, patrons we've got now. It's absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah.
I was, at one time I would have been happy with that number of listeners, let alone patrons, So... So
I've said it before. I mean, this is not this is a passion project, isn't it? It's not like it's it's not anything like a business venture. Anything is this? This is a very, very low key kind of passion project that we just want to keep going.
Well, what I was thinking about that was my experience as I've gone through life is the number of people like yourself, Joe, who sort of demonstrate, who I've met, personally, who demonstrate any kind of interest in shamanism is vanishingly small percentage of all the people who I meet, And you could say that I'm a sort of, I don't know if you could call it a shamanic evangelist or something, but I do tend to.
Well, we've talked about it before, but it's the way in.
Should. But I think that people have to get to a certain point in their lives before they start to see the value of shamanism and esotericism. And they have to also get to that point in their lives having gone through a certain amount of life experience. And it's not anybody else who sort of takes them past that barrier, past the I'm totally bought into the miasma barrier. It's them themselves. It's something that happens within them. And, we are attracting listeners, I guess, who've got all, I would guess most of them have got themselves past that barrier, didn't have any help with it. And like I say, people who get to that place in their lives, they're vanishingly small percentage of the people that I run into in my day-to-day life. But when we're talking about a podcast, we have the whole world, don't we? It's that vanishingly small percentage of literally billions of people. And this is what's been really wonderful about this for me. Our amazing tribe of patrons, a lot of whom are contributing quite valuable stuff to what we're doing. And I don't just mean in a financial way. I mean in many different ways with their input. And also our broader crowd of listeners. Again, there's people, I've been quite busy of late. Again, there's no surprise there. There's people I've still got to get back to. So I apologise if you're waiting for me to get back to you, but I will try to get back to everybody. That has been wonderful in that we can contact. We have people literally from across the world. I found it uplifting that we actually have people listening to us in China. That's that's amazing.
Well, it's all thanks to this thing we call the internet, isn't it? The internet really has only been around for about 20 years.
Yeah,
it's not been long at all.
The internet's never been anything I've been very positive about until this point. It's a fairly big part of the miasma, really. And it's like everything, hasn't it? It's got its negatives and its positives. But you can reach pretty much everybody in the world, pretty much. It's incredible. So, and we've reached whatever it is, 20 odd patrons. I guess that's a large proportion of the people actually have a serious interest in shamanism.
You have a slightly pessimistic view of how many people are into shamanism, do you? Or actually into quote-unquote real shamanism.
Yeah, and our downloads across the 2 podcasts, across Heretics and Woven Energy, are unbelievable. I think it's over 40,000 total downloads. My goodness, So anyway, to our new patrons, thank you. To our existing patrons, thank you so much. You guys are keeping this thing going, helping us to make it better. We've had some great feedback on episodes and endless suggestions on things, good suggestions on things we should be covering. And we will try our level best to get that stuff out. And when the Grove does come along, our long-standing patrons will not be forgotten when it actually gets launched. And so, I hope at that point in time we can pay back some of what.
Well, we've talked about this, haven't we? But I think one of the probably more sensible things to do is to try and just block out a week or two of time where I could potentially come down or whatever. And
that's what we need to do, Joe. You're very welcome in the ancient land of Cornwall, mate.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place, is Cornwall.
You're not kidding. So
thanks ever so much then. And let's crack on. So we're talking about stage 3, just to put everybody into the right frame of mind and the right perspective. We're talking about stage 3 of learning shamanism. We've gone through stage 1, we've gone through stage 2. We're now on stage 3, which we've talked about extensively now, and we're calling it the spirit dance, of which that is one aspect of stage 3. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's right, Joe. That's right.
And today is all about putting stage 3, what we've talked about, into practical context.
Yeah.
So take it away, Damon. I'm looking forward to this myself.
Yeah, so we're going to do a technique today, or not so much a technique, but an approach to technique. One of the things with learning spirit dance is that you can practice the same technique, just like anything in shamanism. You can practice the same technique with various different flavors. Flavors is a word I like to use. Different approaches, so that you approach the same technique from several different angles. And through doing that, you gain a sort of broader understanding. Now, you know what I mean by understanding, but let's say it again. I don't mean understanding on the baseline. I don't mean, you ask yourself, what is the meaning of this technique? And then you give some sort of logical baseline answer to what the meaning of the technique is. And then you classify it and say, okay, now I understand that technique. You know, if you're a long-term listener, you know by now, shamanistic understanding is experiential understanding. You don't just understand it in your mind. You understand it in your body, your mind and your spirit all acting together as one entity and not separate from nature in that process. So we're going to do an approach to spirit dance. I'm going to give a reasonably simple, I say it's reasonably simple, more complex than any techniques we've done so far, but a reasonably simple technique for spirit dance today. And I'm going to apply one of many approaches to it. This particular approach I like to call Tengus, which is a Mongol word. But if you ask, what majority of, when I'm doing it, if you ask the average Mongol shaman, they will call it Chirech, not Tengus. And there's reasons why I prefer the word Tengus that we'll go into much later on. But I don't really want to translate either of those words, Tengus or Chirech, into English. I'd just rather leave it
later on in this episode, or later on. Later on. Okay,
stage 5 or something, because it has to do with how stage 3 is perceived. If you were just to view stage 3 as just spirit dance and nothing else, then you would probably call it Chirech. But I don't, and I don't think that's an appropriate way to view it. Spirit dance is an example of stage 3, not the be-all and end-all of stage 3. So I'm going to call it Tengus, if that's all right with everybody. I've told you the quote-unquote traditional word, if you want to use it, which is Chirech. So you have your choice, basically. And I also think that a review, even if you have listened to them, it's a big undertaking, but we're going to try, effectively, what we're going to try to do here is an audio version of something that should really be on video in the Grove, and will be at some point in time. So this is something we will be doing in the Grove. We're going to try and do it in an audio format. And so I have a small revision list, and the particular episodes I'd like you to go back and revise before attempting this are 16, 17, 18, 22, and 23. If that's right, I do apologise. It's about 5 hours of listening. But I think they will really help. So that's 16.
It's a hell of an introduction, that, Damon. Don't listen to
16,
this until you listen to 5 hours.
17, 18, 22, and 23. Oh, there's no problem listening to this. It's before you actually...
That's the intro to stage 2, isn't it? That's
the pretty solid stage 2. And this is definitely an important thing in here. Very, very linked to the AMP scores, all stage 3 technique are. And so you're also going to need a groove. I don't mean a digital one, I mean a real one. So it can be a pretty rubbish groove. It can be a groove in the living room if you like. But the more, as I've said before, the more natural the setting, the better, basically.
Cracky. Okay, so I think... so what do you mean by find yourself a groove?
So we did talk about this on another episode, but effectively it's a space where you can feel... it's a space, preferably within nature, where you can feel part of the environment. So we talked about this as part of the AMSCA exercises, how you go out into nature and try to practice the AMSCA exercises, especially the ones that involve a kind of dissolving of yourself. So if you remember, we talked about an analogy. I can't remember this episode, but it's a tea bag in the ocean. Do you remember that, Joe?
Yes, I do.
So you are the tea bag in the ocean, and the water inside the tea bag and the water outside the tea bag. The water inside the tea bag is your spirit, and the water outside the tea bag, that's the spirit of nature and the environment that surrounds you. They are not separate. It's not a message in a bottle. You're not a message in a bottle with a cork in the top. You are a tea bag, and the one permeates the other. And this is why I've given a big long list of episodes to go back and go over, because these kind of concepts, I start talking about a level 3 practical exercise. Really, in sort of traditional shamanic training, they should be in your bones. I shouldn't have to explain. Do you follow what I mean? If you're having to worry about what these concepts mean or what these things mean in practical reality, then you shouldn't really be working on stage 3. You should be back on stage 2 and stage 1. That's probably the best. I think I've said that so many times on this podcast. So what I'm going to give you is probably quite advanced exercise. But I think people who've listened to the podcasts and then go back and who've listened to all the podcasts, or a lot of them, and then go back and revise those 5, and have practiced a lot of the exercises that we've given them, are probably in a place where they can attempt this. That's probably the best way. And if you just want to listen to this out of interest, that's fine, just fine. We do have a great out of interest episode coming up, don't we, Joe? We should have mentioned that.
Yes.
Joe keeps harping on at me about quote unquote psychoactive substances. So I have reluctantly agreed to do an episode on, I don't want to call them psychoactive substances, but plant catalysts. So that's coming up.
Plant catalyst. You're making me sound like shortly. A stoner, Damon.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to do that shortly.
I think it would be for no other purpose, and I think it would be a very useful episode, if not for any other purpose, than to give our stamp of this is our stance on them. Because as we know, there's not like, it's not the be all and end all of shamanism. It's plant catalysts, as you and I know, but I get the feeling a lot of people might approach shamanism with that in mind. With these substances, or even tried these substances and be drawn to it. So I think it would be a helpful episode above all else.
It's the starting point for a lot of people who approach shamanism, and unfortunately, it's a dreadful starting point. Just a dreadful starting point. As I've said many times, plant catalysts can be useful in shamanic technique, but when that's your, I guess that's like saying, if I want to draw an analogy, a scalpel is useful to a surgeon, but the person has no training in surgery. A scalpel is probably not the best tool to put in their hand. for a bit of first aid. Yeah, so that's kind of my issue with it. So anyway, we will be coming on to that, and it'll be a general interest episode. I certainly won't be giving any techniques, although I might mention what kind of techniques they can support. And so,
well, you've said before. Well, we'll talk about it later. But you have said before that you've said at some point in stage 2, when if you are in if you've got your chillicity under control and you've a certain stage with this technique, this is where you may want to. You could use a catalyst if you wanted to.
Yes.
So there are.
You are the king of Buret Shikat Harate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. As if your friends can see that in your eyes when you're practicing your technique, then you probably are in a Buret Shikat Harate. Then you probably are in a place where you might have a go at that. But I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying. So, back to Tengiz. What are we going to do? Well, the first thing we have to have, there's a number of things that we have to have in place for this, but we're just going to try and do them one at a time. So the first thing is ashqui. I don't know if we mentioned ashqui before, but basically it's a sense of heaviness. It's a sense of the flesh hanging on your bones, almost like your skeleton is a kind of clothes hanger, and your muscles, your sinews, your internal organs, your tendons, your blood vessels, all of these things are just hanging there on the coat hanger of your skeleton. And this makes you feel very, very heavy. And it puts the weight down in your body. One of the things you've got to not worry about when you're practicing level 3 technique, which is one of the things that distinguishes it from normal dance, is when both Joe and I have done quote-unquote normal dance. When you're doing normal dance, you tend to be worrying about aesthetics. You tend to be worrying about what people, for instance, if you're in a dance competition, what the judges think of you. Yeah, what they think of your position with your chins up and all this kind of stuff. All that kind of stuff. If you're worrying about that, you won't be doing level 3. Yeah, any of that stuff. One of the things is you could become a shaman. Shamans do that kind of those things that ordinary people find a bit embarrassing or strange, or things that may probably even draw negative comments from bystanders or even members of your own family. You have to really not care about that stuff if you want to practice shamanic technique. So ashqui, that needs to be in place. And one of the ways you can check your ashqui is sort of stamping. You just stand there in your grove, your comfortable area. The grove should have enough space for you to move around. To start off with, you don't want any obstacles. The best kind of groves are stone circles and stuff like that, or circular groves of trees. Or an open area around a bonfire. Sometimes you want a central point. In my garden, I've put in some standing stones. So
did you end up doing that?
Yeah. So, but it's a bit pointless because just at the top of the hill I got real ones, So it's just, but it's they're convenient. They're just outside the door now, and so a central focal point like that is wonderful. The bonfire is the best of the best, but it's a bit impractical for most people and just want to do a quick bit of practice. But you do want a space where you can move around. Now, obstacles, there's 2 levels to that. When you're not very experienced, you want no obstacles. You don't want anything that's going to trip you up, because you will trip up. It's a common mistake to make when you start. And the reason you'll trip up is actually that you're getting better at it. As soon as you stop thinking about your feet and what your feet are doing, as soon as that goes out of the picture, your feet will be moving intuitively in a shamanistic kind of intuitive way. And they won't be thinking about obstacles. And so you will trip up once you start getting better at it. Ironically, when you're bad at it, you probably won't trip up if there's obstacles around to trip over. So, but once you get really good at it, then obstacles are wonderful because your momentum, your energy has to carry you over them, right? So let's say a few obstacles. If there's any branches or anything lying around on the ground, if you're in the forest, then just move them out the way. If there's any big roots sticking up, then stay away from that kind of thing, stones or whatever. So, in the place, the first thing, just to practice Ashku, the first thing is to get yourself into that Amskar place. You know, that lightweight observation of self that we keep going on about in all the Amskar episodes. You need to be in that place. If you're not, don't even start moving. Once you're there, start Ashku practice. One of the ways you know if you've got Ashku right is you start stamping your feet on the ground. It doesn't have to be very hard. If you get a sort of slap sound from the ground, then your Ashku isn't in place. What you want is a dull thud that seems to come from under the earth. Like I say, it's not about power. You don't have to stamp really hard to achieve this, but you'll know that your heaviness is there, your Ashku is there when you get a sort of dull thud or resonance coming that almost seems like it comes from about a foot under the ground or something like that. I wouldn't like to say the depth exactly, but you can tell it's not a surface slap sound when you're stamping your feet. So once you've got that heaviness in place, then we're going to do what we've talked about before. We're just going to start walking. And you want to just start walking. The advantage of a circular grove is you can walk around the perimeter. Obviously, if you've got your awesome bonfire at the center, this is a lot of fun. But if it's a tree or a rock or just the center of your circular-ish area, then that's fine as well. Or even a folded up coat or something as a center point. Or just bring a big rock and stick it in the center. You know, there's all sorts of things you can do. You can do land art, something nice, weave some branches together, or whatever you want. As you're walking, you want to keep that heaviness. You want to keep that Ashku on, and you want to also simultaneously keep the lightweight observation of self. I'm not going to go into what that means because those episodes 16, 17, 18, 22, and 23 will go over what I mean by that lightweight observation of self. Basically, you need to be aware of your breathing, you need to be aware of your heart rate, but you need your awareness not to affect your breathing and your heart rate as you do this exercise. That's especially for this one, especially breathing. Your observation, your lightweight observation of your breathing must not affect your natural breathing, or this isn't going to work. So there's the first stage: is get the heaviness in place. Get the Amskar. The Amskar needs to be in place. Then you get the heaviness in place. The Amskar will probably go away. Practice the heaviness, the Ashku, until the Amskar comes back. You're in that state of Chalisti with Amskar, the lightweight observation of self. Look at you look at yourself in the way that an eagle looks at you. It doesn't care what you're thinking about. Yeah. Has application on many different levels. Once the heaviness is in place, you start walking. As soon as you start walking, the whole miasma thing is going to come in, and you're going to have to practice the walking quite a lot. The advantage of the grove is you can walk around the periphery in a circle. There's no need to walk fast, just a normal sort of walking pace. And
this isn't using our dull thud footsteps. Then this is just regular walking.
You could, while you're doing that walking, you can produce them if you want to, if the Ashku is in place. And so you'll know if the Ashku is in place if on any given step you can produce that dull thud if you want to. Yeah, but no, you don't produce it on every step. There's no point. That's just really a test of whether the heaviness is in place or not. Because if it's not, you'll hear a slap when your foot goes, if you stamp your foot down rather than a thud. Yeah. And so practice walking round and round like that until you can get to the point where you've got your Chalistis on, your Amskars on, your Ashkuis on, all of those things without thought, without baseline impetus, without any kind of cerebral activity making those things happen. You need to iron out that kind of baseline stuff, or at least greatly reduce it, so that you're in that state. Once you've got the Ashku in place and you're walking around quite naturally, you're not really thinking about what you're doing. You get used to the environment. You start to take on that teabag feeling, the teabag in the ocean feeling. So you're not walking through the environment. You become a process of change that's going on as part of the environment. that's kind of, once you got yourself into that state, with all these things in place, the Chilisti in place, the Amsker in place, the Ashgree in place, the walking's happening without thought, and you've got that teabag in the ocean, where you're part of the environment, and there's no differentiation or little differentiation between you and the place that you're in. Your grove, that's another definition of your grove, is the part of nature that you're a part of. There's a sort of higher level definition of your grove. Once all that's in place, then you're in a place to start the technique. But so you can see that what I've described so far, even if you've done a lot of Amsker level practice, I would take several days just getting that in place. Or, you don't have to do each practice session for very long, half an hour or something's fine. But don't rush it. Don't rush from one thing to the next. That's one of the mistakes that people make with shamanism. Well, we know, don't we? They leap straight to that spirit journey, don't they? No foundation, no preparation.
You leap straight to the mushrooms.
There's a course I saw. Was it a weekend course, Identify Your Spirit Animal, or something like that? I can't remember.
Yeah, they're all over the place, these courses.
Oh dear. Anyway, so basically,
imagination here, imagination in those other courses you were mentioning, they play a huge role in that kind of stuff. They're obsessed with imagination.
Which is why Chilisti is so important. If you're good at your Chilisti, if you're good at your level 1, forget your Amsker. If you're good at your level 1, you will at least know whether your Ashgree's in place, whether your Amsker's in place, You'll know whether it is or isn't, because you won't be thinking. And what those courses, of course, ask you to do is the first thing they start to do. I'm not everybody, but it's always imagine this, imagine that. And that is, satisfy your baseline desire, isn't it? Your obsession with the baseline that's been instilled into you since childhood by society. Satisfy it rather than trying to find a slightly different
also
way.
On a slightly more innocent level for these people, it's easy. It's the easy side of it. I mean, it's so easy to sit there and imagine. I've done it. I've been in bed, just drifting, and I've seen crap going on in front of my vision, and I've turned it into a story, and I've been flying through the universe and stuff. And I've been there and done that, and it's easy. It's almost like a byproduct of just sitting there and letting yourself go.
Yeah.
So it is easy to see how this stuff permeates. The teachings of this, because it's so easy to misrepresent it.
And you need your integration with reality to be stronger than the average person, not less strong than the average person to be a shaman. You need to be integrated with nature. You need to be integrated with the place you're in, the reality that surrounds you. And the issue is that a lot of the people who are attracted to those sort of things, those imagination-based shamanism, their integration with reality naturally is probably weaker than the average member of society, just by the very nature of the fact that they've been attracted to that stuff. So I'm sure long-term listeners to this show will be well aware of me being down on this stuff. So
just to put a pin in it and park it for a future time, one thing that might be interesting to talk to you about, which I don't think we ever have talked about, is astral projection and what astral projection, the concept of astral projection, what that really means in terms of shamanism, because that's another one of those big branches along the path of shamanism that people tend to get stuck in. So,
we could do another episode on what
interesting.
Yeah, on what hollow unicorns mean in terms of, I don't know, the economy. The issue is that people come up with these terms, they use these terms liberally, and there's a couple of magazines like this. There's one called Kindred Spirit. You read this stuff and you read what it says under a lot of, like articles and stuff, and there's these sort of words that get used in the sentences that like astral projection and various others.
It's like it just becomes the lexicon of the clique, doesn't it?
They get used in terms of there's an assumption that everybody understands what they mean. And I'd be massively surprised if anybody understands what they mean, frankly, because a lot of them are verging on meaningless. And yeah, you could say the term astral projection has some relationship to a spirit journey. You could say it does. But if you think of words being defined in terms of the average member of society, the Oxford English Dictionary is defined by usage, how people use these terms. Everybody puts an S on the end of a word to make it, or an ES on the end of a word to make it plural. And because everybody does that, then that becomes the accepted convention. Well, if everybody defines astral projection as a flight of the imagination in terms of their use of that term astral projection, then fine. All I would say is that's got nothing to do with shamanism. Absolutely nothing. If it's a synonym for, what shamans do, real shamans do in spirit journey, then that's probably not the definition that most of the readers of Kindred Spirit are have in mind when they use the term. That's probably the best way to put it. Yeah. So anyway, sure we could do that, mate. Sure we could do that.
It'd be another episode like we did before, breaking down the word spirit. I just get the impression that when you
no. There's a difference there, though. There's a difference there. Shamanic societies all have a word for spirit. Yeah. They and as we've said, Mongols have got loads of words for spirit. Sus is one. That's one we haven't used before. So we gradually get people's Mongol terminology.
We're up to about 25 now.
Sus is one. That's a more mythological use of spirit. Like they say the spirits are watching over us and all this kind of spirits of our ancestors. That's a Sus. But we've done loads of words for spirit in Mongol before, haven't we? So we missed that one out of the episode on spirit with the real meaning of the word spirit. But there's another one for you. So the key point is that sure we can do that, and that's I reckon the correct time to do that. It's another one of those
exactly. It's the sticking point.
Question and answer sessions.
Yeah, when somebody gets into
what have werewolves got to do with shamanism?
Well, when somebody gets into shamanism, it's like a road, isn't it? That you need to walk down. You need to go down the road, and there's all these little side roads that spin off at various different points. Yeah. And you could get caught on any one of them and expand them and balloon them up into a complete world in and of itself, which has nothing to do with the actual path that you're supposed to be walking. And the path of shamanism is full of these little branch roads going off in all sorts of different directions.
Exactly.
And people just get lost in the weeds. So maybe from that perspective, an episode on that would be quite cool.
Yeah, sure.
Just to try and keep people on the straight.
I mean, if we get into the meaning of the, what you might, as somebody who has a level of involvement or a level of understanding in, top line, midline understanding of shamanism, you might do a mapping between those sort of airy fairy words and actual, shamanic technique. You might do that kind of mapping. My point is that the average member of the population does not do that when they use those words. That's my point. So coming back to the technique, because we still have a way to go, you're now going to need a drum, I'm afraid. So if you haven't got one, you're going to have to get yourself a biscuit tin and a spoon. Yeah, that's where I started. There's no disgrace in that. And remember I said, don't worry what people think about you. So we're talking about once you're comfortable with moving around, walking around the perimeter of your grove in a state of chillicity with your lightweight observation of self, derived from your Amscott practice in place to the point where you're aware of your breathing and your heart rate, but most importantly, your breathing. And that awareness is not affecting your breathing or heart rate at all. And that you've got your ashqui in place, your heaviness in place, and all that stuff's happening without you thinking about it. Now you can start the technique. You need the drum on your left hand. You need the beater in your right hand if you want to be traditional. If you want to practice your torsional teen, just swap them over, and I recommend doing that on on a kind of regular basis as you practice in this. So what I do also recommend for this is I'd like to use the tear position and the half task position. So reviewing what they are would be useful as well. Obviously, when the drum is struck, you're forming the half task, the folded wings position. In order to keep that quite nice, if you've got a long beater like I have, hold it about halfway down. Don't hold it right at the end. It'll just your position won't be very nice when you hit the drum. Alternatively, I don't want to use the beater at all. Your palm or your hand hitting the drum is just fine. So, drum in the left hand, beater in the right hand. Next thing is do the same thing, exactly the same thing. You're moving around your groove. You're a change that's happening within the natural environment of your groove. You become that change in a state of chillicity. Let's just say the four things are in place. So the four things being chillicity, lightweight observation of self through your ASCA practice, your not thinking, and you've got that heaviness, your ashqui. Those things are all in place. Just with the drumming on your left hand, somewhere we did something about holding the drum. Can you remember where we did that, Joe? Was that the Bucking Henrik technique episode?
It was. Probably it was either episode 18 or 19 of Bucking Henrik.
So 18 probably is. That's one of the ones on my list. 16, 17, 18, 22, 23. So and then just the same thing. You need to go until not just you dissolve within the environment, but the drum and the beater also dissolve within the environment. Once you've got that in place, now you can start to do the compression and expansion, which we've talked about before. Shurug is kind of this compression and expansion in lots of words written in Mongol, but let's go with Shurug. That is, the expansion is when you move into the Teorach position, made famous by the Woven Energy podcast logo of the girl who's in the Teorach position, the open, the embracing position. When you make that embracing position, make sure that the drum is on your left hand in such a way that the inside of the drum is facing up to the sky. And then as you move around the area, you just move around holding that Teorach position with the drum and the beater, and all of those things absolutely in place, all of the other four things in place as well, until again you dissolve. So every time you add a new level to the technique, what tends to happen is the miasma comes in, your thinking comes in, and you want to practice each of these progressions with the technique to the point where you end up back to, you move away from chillicity, you go back to chillicity. Every time you put something new on it. So as you start doing your heaviness training, you move away from chillicity, you practice till you come back to chillicity. Then you start walking, you move away from chillicity, you come back to chillicity, and then you pick up the drum and the beater, you move away to chillicity, you come back to chillicity, then you form the Teorach position, you move away from chillicity, you come back to chillicity. So these are waves and waves of practice, and that in itself is shurug. This kind of wave-like action in your practice is shurug in Mongol.
It's very natural when you learn new skills as well, just as you get familiar with a certain skill.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what the skill is. But yeah, I guess you could say that even people who are good at very cerebral skills. I remember the story about the great Go master Go Seigen, who was supposedly the greatest Go player of all time. Supposedly the weakest move you can play in Go's, if you're going first, is to put your counter on the central cross on the board. And apparently he played that about 50% of the games he played. He played the weakest move possible to start with, and he was rarely beating this guy. And but he was asked by a reporter how he knew what to play, because he didn't. Computers have advanced to the point where by the time he died, where they were not bad at Go. And the reporter basically asked him, why do you never play the move the computer says you should? And his reply was, I just make beautiful patterns. And so but it was obviously his intuitive understanding of what beauty meant that was enabling him to play at this incredibly high level, probably in something approaching a state of chelicity in it, even in such a ridiculously baseline activity as Go. Go's an awesome game if nobody's played it, but if you're over the
baseline, it is.
If you're over the age of 16, don't ever expect to play at a high level at any point during your life. They do start very young. And the standards are, I guess, like in chess, the standards are ridiculously high, just ridiculously high. But I do enjoy a game of Go. So maybe if we ever have time, Joe, we can have a go at that baseline activity. It's what I describe as one of the least bad baseline activities. And that's because it's sort of derived from the battlefield. The rules of the game were sort of half divided. From what's derived from what's known as senjutsu in Japan, the art of battlefield strategy, and so although it's dumbed down to the point of anyway, so but it is quite interesting for that. So how are we going to hit this drum? Well, we're going to do it when on the in breath. We're not going to make ourselves breathe in, though, are we? Everybody knows that, don't you? It's our natural breathing.
Lightweight observation of self.
A lightweight observation of self, and not on every in-breath, and not on every second in-breath, and not on every third in-breath, and not on any particular number in-breath, but on whatever in-breath takes your fancy without you. So this comes back to, which in-breath to do it on. We don't want a random number generator here, but if you remember the chain, the Tengar, the underlying spirit of nature, gives rise in the state of chelicity to the setal, the kind of impetus within a human being, or the underlying part of the spirit of nature, the Tengar. The setal is that part of which with a human being can come in contact with when they are in a state of chelicity. That and not the human setal, not the human-derived setal, but the nature-derived setal, which is called Zorot, which gives rise to Guche, which is like a shamanic kind of insight. That is what you want to decide which in-breath you're going to do this on. So, as you're moving around in that state, when that, it's not even a decision really, it's a non-decision. When that non-decision occurs, let's call it an event or something, when that event occurs, you are going to start off with, this isn't the technique, but this is just a stepping stone towards it. You're going to bring your hands in to the half-task position and hit the drum. Simple as that. So just as you start to breathe, your hands come in. Not too fast, they just come in and you hit the drum. And then you just immediately, smoothly open out again and keep going. And then you do that for a while until you're doing that kind of stage of the progression without thought. The next one is that as you're moving along, you are going to effectively, as that happens, you're going to either on the step, on the in-breath, you're either going to step the inside foot, and the foot I mean by the inside foot is the one that's towards the bonfire or standing stone or duffel coat or duffel bag or whatever you've got in the center of your grove. You're going to step that foot, the inside foot, if that's the foot that's stepping, that's going to step away from the bonfire as you form the half-task position and beat the drum on the in-breath. And then as you open out again, the other foot will just naturally step out and you'll reverse direction and just keep going the other way. And then when the next breath comes, you'll reverse direction again. If it's the outside foot that happens to be stepping at that point, on the in-breath, you are going to withdraw that foot. And you're going to find this the hardest. You're going to withdraw that foot and you're going to turn away from the bonfire or standing stone or whatever it is. Just turn away from the center of the grove. If it's the outside foot, you do not choose which foot And you definitely don't choose the inside foot because the step is easier. You're going to withdraw that foot. Now, for a lot of people, they're about to put their weight onto that foot, and you'll find this. If you do it right, if it's genuinely the breath that's deciding when that foot is being withdrawn, you'll find this very difficult. If you don't find this very difficult, you're probably not doing it right. And so that foot will be sucked back by the breath and by the drum being struck. The foot will be sucked back behind you, and you will simply turn your body. Once it's been sucked back, you will turn your body again away from the bonfire. So your haftas is always made away from the center of the grove, away from the bonfire, whatever it is. And then again, it's just the same. From there, you'll just naturally step out the other way. It's very, very easy to do if you time it based on the stepping. But you should be able to pull that foot back no matter what part of the step that in-breath starts on. You should be able to pull it back if you practice this well enough.
Yeah, and of course the breath or the strike of the drum is going to be whenever it is. You're not planning breathing. It, so we don't know where our foot's going to be.
Exactly. And the absolute key to this is it's natural breathing. If you're affecting your breathing, if you're making that happen, for instance, and martial artists will probably find even more difficulty with this because they're trained to synchronize the breathing with their body movement. You can't do that. This is just simply your body moves doing what it's doing for walking, and your breath is doing what it's doing. And then on that in-breath, that foot comes away. That foot gets sucked out. It could be traveling forwards and it just gets sucked back, and you turn away and then turn out again, and you're walking the other way around the grove. And so...
And we're walking in circles. We're walking in circles here.
Yeah, well, it doesn't have to be a circle. It just start off with, all these things are to start off with. The circle's the easiest thing to do.
It's in one direction around your point of...
Where you're going clockwise, and then when you pull your foot back or take your foot forwards, you're then going anti-clockwise. And then another breath, you're going clockwise, another breath, you're going anti-clockwise. But remember, it's not every other breath. And it's not randomly chosen either. It's just when the spirit takes you, that's how I always say it. When the spirit takes you, that's when it happens. And it happens, it's not decided. Yeah? And so have I made that clear, Joe? Yeah. So
I mean, it's obviously one of these ones that would be extremely beneficial to have a video of.
It's absolutely going to be in the grove for sure. This is going to be in the grove.
When you say the in breath, and this is a colossal baseline question, but in the frame that I'm asking it.
Yeah. It's the start of the in-breath.
Obviously, if you're breathing slowly, it's the start of the in-breath. Right?
If you're breathing slowly, it's the start of the transition. Yeah,
it's the start from breathing out, and then
it's the start. Because if you're breathing slowly, it would just be the start of the in-breath. Yeah, but if you're doing with some alacrity, as I do, that in-breath might not last very long. Again, as what happens with these exercises like this, as in many spirit dance exercises, is it builds. What you find is the technique builds, and you start off doing slowly when you're learning it, but when you've dissolved, you feel a kind of... Now, I don't want anybody to imagine this. I'm probably going to regret saying it, but you feel a kind of building a power, a hooch. We remember we talked about hooch in one of these episodes. You start to feel
episode 16.
And you quite naturally, it starts to... not necessarily physically speed up, but there's a speeding up of some sort of power, a speeding of power, a building sense within it. And when you do this to music, which you can do if you want, take your ghetto blaster out into nature, I've got no problem with that. You want something that matches that. You want something with a driving rhythm. It doesn't have to be fast. I mean, one of the problems with songs, I used to do this to Killing Joke, believe it or not. But actually, when you're learning it, you probably want something slower, but with a jiving rhythm. And a great tune that I use a lot when I am doing this to music. I usually don't, because there are downsides to doing it to music as well. But you definitely don't want Tyrak appearing. Everything should be smooth. Everything should.
By that you mean cut.
Yeah, it should be. Everything should be nice and smooth. You want negdech in place, yeah. that just everything's joined and smooth. And, we'll come on to Tyrak later. As I say, when you do Tyrak, there's usually a reason for it. You don't do it for no reason. And certainly the rhythm is no reason.
Put some examples in on Patreon for people, I think, if you've got time.
I'll do that, yeah. But the tune I was going to recommend, which I might have recommended before, which is wonderful for this kind of practice, is the Mummer's Dance by Lorena McKennitt. Just a wonderful piece of music for this particular type of practice. It's not too fast, but it does have a driving rhythm behind it. And
does this bear any resemblance to, say, with big groups where you'd have a shaman in the middle and doing his thing, and then everybody would be around the outside, sort of giving that rhythm, whether it's breaths or whether it's drums or whether it's something consistent.
It doesn't have to be a circle. And this is just one of many techniques, and it won't be a circle eventually. You start going all over the place. It starts with things like figures of 8, and it becomes like the path of, I don't know if you've seen the path of a fly takes in the air, the sort of random path it takes when it's been disturbed. It's sort of an evasive movement, and it's incredibly difficult to predict. And that's what it becomes like when you get good at this stuff. You go all over the place. But,
I meant, when from the question, I meant, like when you were talking about music, I meant, like when you often have a group of people around a central shaman in the middle,
sure,
and
they're
all
creating a rhythm.
Providing the music themselves, the rhythm themselves.
Yeah, no, just when you mentioned that, I just have all those images of Tyrak just flash in front of my face. But obviously it's done well sometimes, yeah. And we talked about that recently with a cargo cult, and the guys who worship Prince Philip, supposedly, yeah. And we talked about those guys. There's some video of those guys on YouTube somewhere. So, but you're not really creating in this exercise. As you see that the drum is becoming part of your breathing. It's not really producing the rhythm itself, and that's why you might want some additional music. But you must keep your Celesti on. There's all those things that I've mentioned. Your Negdech, your Ashqui, your Amskar, your Chelicity, your Pagdamstesab. All of these things need to be on, not off. And the most fundamental one that tells you, in that progression that I've described, should I go to the next stage or not? Should I go to the next stage or not? Are you in a state of Chelicity? If the answer is no, then don't go to the next stage. Even go back a stage, do more practice. Or if the answer is, if you're in a state of Chelicity and if you practiced all those Chelicity exercises, whether you are or not. Then go on to the next stage in the progression. Yeah. And so that's pretty much the technique. One of the things you can do when you withdraw, what you'll find is that withdrawal on the in-breath, it becomes quite powerful after a while. Don't force the power in it. Start very gently. It becomes quite powerful after a while. It sort of sometimes naturally makes your body bend in the middle and your head goes down. There's no problem with that. Don't worry about that. It's not anything you have to correct. If you're probably been studying martial arts for years, you probably think you have to keep your head up and you start correct. No, your body goes the way your body goes, and you don't worry about correcting that kind of movement. So when you do come across that, which you will, that natural tendency for your head to go down on the withdrawal, on the in-breath, don't correct it. It's fine. It's fine. You'll see shamans doing that kind of thing all the time. Yeah. So
cool.
Yeah.
You happy with that?
Yeah, and like I said, this will be in the Grove. It'll be one of the first things I'll put in there, actually, now that we've gone through it. But that's getting on for, that's 55 minutes, something like that. That's what I wanted to cover today. So I don't know if you have anything, Joe.
No, I think that's fantastic. I mean, it's a great little practical example.
Yeah, it's not so little. When you start practicing it, you'll find out it's not so little.
Obviously I didn't mean
that's
it like
a
that.
lot.
But, we've got.
That's a lot.
I'm just, I'm just pleased that we're covering this stuff on this podcast. To be honest,
sure,
the practical stuff. It's
and there's layers and layers I can put on top of that technique, layers and layers of stuff. So maybe we'll come back to it at a later date and stick some more stuff on. But I think, as we said, how about the wonderful world of plants for the next episode?
Yes. The wonderful world of plants.
Sounds a lot better than psychoactive substances, doesn't it?
Well, we'll have to talk about why we call them plant catalysts. I mean, we've talked about it a few times on the podcast. Yeah. I mean, it is one of the things, though, plant catalysts. We've touched on it now and again in the podcast. We've never really gone deep into them and given them the attention that perhaps other people would give them.
Yeah, you will definitely force me to do that, Joe. I know you. But additionally, I'd like to talk about some evolutionary stuff on that one as well.
Yeah, cool. I mean, I think it was episode 16 you were talking about them before. But you did talk about that towards the end of episode 16. So that's, yet again, another good bit of listening for you if you want to listen to episodes. What were the episodes again, Damon? 16, 17, 18, 22, and 23?
Correct.
All right. Great stuff. So, well, we'll think on our plant catalyst episode for next time, and then we'll see where we want to go after that. Maybe do another practical episode or two.
Cool.
But that's been fantastic.
Thanks a lot, mate.
Yep. Thanks. See you soon, guys. Go to wovenenergy.com/start-here for your exclusive Get Started episode, and you can support us on Patreon or Patreon by going to patreon.com/ what is it, Damon? Is it just Woven Energy or is it Woven-Energy?
Yeah, I think it's patreon.com/Woven Energy. Do you want me to just check it? I'll just check it.
Yeah.
.com/Woven Energy. I've never actually done this.
And what do they get? What do they get for supporting us on Patreon, Damon?
For $1 a month, they get a big thank you. Everybody gets thanked. And they also get access to our Patreon exclusive episodes for $1 a month. And then there are various higher levels where they get more things and people get more and more involved in what we're doing. And we do have some patrons who are really, really involved in what we're doing now. And again, I cannot reiterate how appreciated that is. It's certainly recently I felt that some of the feedback we've had from our patrons has probably improved what we're doing quite a bit and given us some direction, which is fantastic.
Nice.
So, yeah.
So it's a family. It's a nice family to get involved in.
Indeed, or a tribe. I like to describe it as a tribe.
Yeah, you've been reading Seth Godin, haven't you?
Not recently, but yeah, that's a cool guy.
All right, well, thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks a lot.